When I was about 8 years old, me, my brother, and my biological mom were at one of her friends' houses when my phone was about to die. I asked our friends if they had a charger, but they all had iPhones while I had an Android. My biological mom, being the neglectful mother she is, that's a story for another time, told me to walk the 30 minutes back home to get my phone charger. So I began to walk back. At the first intersection, about 5 to 6 minutes from the friend's house, I had to wait for the crosswalk. For some reason, the crosswalk wouldn't change, so I ended up standing there for about 5 to 10 minutes. It may have been shorter, but it was a while ago. When a woman in a white panel van pulled up next to me, she rolled down the passenger side window and told me she had been watching me stand there and that she was going to give me a ride home. I told her no thanks and that I'm okay, but she kept saying to get in the van over and over. I tried to tell her I was fine, but she started getting angry at me. Finally, I turned around and booked it back to the friend's house, probably the closest I've gotten to being kidnapped. Side note, my mom thought I was in the friend's house the entire time, so no one would have known I had been kidnapped. This happened about roughly an hour ago. I, 14 female, was walking my dog Stella around my neighborhood. I've been at a craft fair all day and was super tired because it had been raining and I hadn't made much money. I was asked to walk Stella just after I'd gotten back with my mom, and I said yes. We head out. I'm strolling along, watching the sky because it looks like it's going to pour and I don't have a raincoat on, just an oversized hoodie. I hear a car turn down the street I'm walking on with Stella, and I don't think much of it. It gets closer to me and slows down. I assume it's going to turn into a driveway, but I look back just to be cautious. The car, I believe it was a Chevrolet, but I don't know. The car has no front license plate. This is illegal in Canada. In Canada, you must have both front and back license plates. Though if your car is from the US but you now live or are just in Canada, you're all good. The car doesn't turn into a driveway. I'm a little more unsettled now. I hear it slowly getting closer and closer to me, so I pull Stella to the other side of me off the road. I'm even more frightened when I hear one of those doors on the car open. As it is driving, I mutter to myself, "Oh fuck, here we go. I better be able to scream well." A hand grabs my wrist and jerks me towards the car. I wrestle with the guy for a couple seconds and then I scream. I've not screamed in quite a while. I'm quite a quiet teen unless I'm with my friends. The dude jerks his arm again, and Stella, being the silly goof she is, finally clues in that I'm in danger. She pounces on the guy, grabbing onto his leg with her jaws and making him scream like a girl. One thing to note is Stella is part terrier. Terriers are rat killers, so when they grab onto something, they ain't letting go. The guy has loosened his grip on me by now, and I seize the opportunity to kick him hard enough to make him drop if he'd been standing. He shrieks and lets go of me, which makes Stella let go of his leg. I grabbed her and sprinted back to my house. I got the license plate. I don't remember it now. It was from New Brunswick. I'm in British Columbia. I'm scared to think how far the two men could have gotten with me if Stella hadn't been with me. I'm going to start off to say this isn't some flashy, scary story. It doesn't have the most satisfying ending, but no one got hurt, which I'm grateful for. This all happened when I was in like 5th or 6th grade, so I would have been around 8 or 9 at this time. I'm now, as of writing this, 23 years old, going to be 24 in July. So my memory may be a bit foggy, but what happened this day will forever stand out to me. I, at the time, 8 or 9 female, and my sister, who was 2 years younger than me, let's call her Paya, went to a little French Emerson school growing up. At the time, we were not living close to it, so we had to take a school bus. The school bus where we would be picked up in the morning and dropped off in the afternoon was about a block or so away from the apartment building we lived in. My sister and I would get up at 7 a.m. and catch the bus for 7:30 a.m. to get to school for 8 a.m. There was another family that also caught the bus at our stop with some younger children, so we were never alone. But my sister and I made the walk there and home without any adult because my mom worked nights and my sister and I thought we were old enough to walk the short distance alone. This is important later. This all happened during late spring, I think around April or May, when the weather was getting consistently hotter during the day, upwards of 20 degrees Celsius. I would also note that I have an allergic asthma, which means activities like running or strenuous exercise, as well as allergens like pollen, can and will trigger my asthma. For this reason, I wasn't a big runner, and seeing me run was a rare occurrence. So in the morning, bright and early, at 7:15 a.m., my sister and I had out to go wait at the bus stop for our school bus. Everything was pretty normal, me being the more obviously tired one of us, but something stuck out to me. I noticed an old brown pickup truck parked in one of the driveways of a nearby house. A person sat in the driver's seat, seemingly doing something, maybe asleep. This wouldn't have been weird, except I knew the people there drove a minivan. Maybe it was just how ugly the color of the brown pickup truck was. Maybe it stuck out to me. In hindsight, I should have questioned why the guy in the truck just sat there in his vehicle for over 15 minutes doing nothing, but I was too tired to care. Off to school we went, and the day was honestly forgettable in how routine it was. On the bus to go home, however, my sister and I got into an argument, so when we got to our bus stop, Pia took off running back to the house ahead of me, leaving me with the parents who picked up their younger children at the stop. And then after they left, I was alone. I was not impressed by the stunt my sister had pulled, but began my walk down the street with traffic near me going the same way as I was walking. I was about a minute into my walk home when I noticed that brown pickup truck that oddly looked familiar. I hadn't realized it was probably the one from that morning, slowing down beside me as I walk. Now it was a pretty hot day. One kid had collapsed during recess because of a heat stroke, so I was having a hard time already due to the heat. The driver of this old pickup rolls down the passenger window to talk to me, waving a hand at me to get me to stop. I do stop because I was raised to be polite, but I kept my distance. The patch of grass separating the curb and the sidewalk meaning I had at least 60 centimeters of space between me and the curb. "Hey kiddo, where you headed?" The driver, a man in his 50s or so, I'd ask. Now I had been raised knowing all about stranger dangers, so I was already on guard about this. "Home," I told him, purposefully vague about it. At this point, the man had leaned over and unlocked his passenger door, and I was able to see him a little better. He had a tattoo of what I think was a tiger and some other animal of his right arm. He wore a plain gray muscle shirt. Couldn't see what kind of pants he was wearing because I was short. His hair was a salt and pepper kind of gray and black, pulled into a low, greasy ponytail. He had a mustache, not to profile, but like one of those stereotypical pedo stashes. His skin tone was tan, but he seemed to be Caucasian, and his hands were large with a scar across his knuckles. "How about you hop in, and I'll give you a ride? It's pretty hot out today." This complete stranger offered me with a smile, and I noticed he seemed to be having a missing tooth. I, of course, smiled back, not to be rude, and simply said a polite, "No thank you, sir," and started walking again. Now, this would have been fine and dandy if it had just ended at that, but instead he began keeping pace with me in his truck and insisting that I get in, that it was too hot out, and that all the other kids had been picked up. Now, this struck me as odd, because this meant he had been watching when all of us had gotten off the bus. Though I guess he didn't notice my sister run off, but still, this was creepy. I again said, "No thank you," but he didn't seem to take the hint. In fact, he became more pushy and maybe a little irritated. He had pulled up so close to the curb, he was almost jumping it with his pickup now. And at this point, I was really feeling scared that this man might do something I wouldn't like. So I quickly said, "Have a nice day," and then I took off running as fast as I could towards my apartment complex. I vaguely heard him shouting something at me, but I just kept running, cutting over the grassy hill with a few trees on it instead of staying on the sidewalk. I saw that someone had just left the underground parking area that connected to the buildings, and I ran in just before the big door that lets cars out closed. I didn't stop running until I made it up to the 8th floor, got into my house, and slammed and locked the door. At this point, I was in a full blown asthma attack, as well as crying in fear. I collapsed against the door, hyperventilating and sobbing, and my sister was now freaking out at how I just burst in like that. But I couldn't get out what I was trying to say as I could barely breathe. Eventually, I was able to calm down, and my mother came home for what she had been doing, and I was able to explain what had happened. My mother then called the police, and we had a female officer come interview me, to whom I encountered only what had happened on my way home from the bus stop. I didn't put it together that he had probably been watching us earlier that morning as well until later, and the nice policewoman took my statement. Unfortunately, nothing ever came from the investigation, and it didn't help that I couldn't remember the license plate, other than it looked like it wasn't from Ontario, Canada, which in hindsight is even scarier to me. So I never really heard anything after that. But to the man who may or may not tried to have kidnapped me, let's not meet ever.